Hello, looks like we're broadcasting and we're up, so it's Philosophy Roulette 64. And we're gonna read some philosophy now, which is awesome. Yeah, welcome to Phil Papers. Oh yeah, analysis, this is the same as this morning. Shocking. Nothing else came through. Well, let's double check analysis, because who knows. Let's see what we got. Yeah, I've looked at all of this stuff. Classless. Who's classless? Now that's a cool fro. I don't know if you guys can see, but look at that fro on there. That's cool. Let's see if the paper's available. Nope. Okay. Non-skeptical infallibilism. 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 Put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Ah, shucks. First person. Alright, so what was this? Oh, wait. Dogmatism. I like I like thinking about dogmatism. Let's see. Yay, it's here. Always good. So, let's go for this one. Make my life easy with a nice analysis paper. And if you join me in the chat live one day, you can always retrieve the paper by typing !paper in the chat box. So, I'd love for you to join me one day. It'd be fun. Forthcoming analysis. Yes. Let's see. Save file. And there we go. And we're off. Plenty of room left for the Dogmatist. Is that like left room, like on the left side? Well, I know this is the right side of the screen, but it's my left. Alright. Barnett, 2019 provides an interesting new challenge against dogmatist accounts of perceptual justification. For present purposes, the dogmatist key claim is the denial of the following Cartesian thesis. Perceptual incredulism. One is never justified in believing what one perceives unless one has independent evidence that one's perceptual experiences are reliable. To deny incredulism is to allow that some experiences can provide some degree of justification even if you have no independent evidence that they are reliable. We'll have to see how this plays out. The Cartesian and the dogmatist also disagree over the relative importance of one's own experiences compared with other people's experiences. The Cartesian accepts the following. Perceptual impartiality. Having a perceptual experience can never give you substantially stronger justification for a perceptual belief than you would get from knowing that another person has had such an experience. Okay, so the fact that I experienced something doesn't matter compared to if someone else has experienced it. Alright. Given the Cartesian view of your own experience, it would seem irrationally chauvinistic to count one's own experiences as stronger evidence of the truth than another person's experiences, unless you have some evidence suggesting that your experiences really do amount to more reliable evidence. Well, you can just not trust other people what they say, but I guess that's not the point. Assuming they're sincere, why should you not believe them over what you perceive? Okay, whereas the dogmatist accepts perceptual partiality. Having a perceptual experience can sometimes give you substantially stronger justification for a perceptual belief than you would get from knowing that another person has had such an experience. To be clear, the idea is not just that we have a special introspective way of knowing about our own experiences. The Cartesian will happily accept this too. The idea is that the mere fact of my having the experience can provide some degree of justification for a perceptual belief, quite apart from my knowing anything about this experience, and in particular, quite apart from knowing whether my own perceptual experiences are generally reliable. Alright, let's see. Diachronic problem for dogmatism. Given the dogmatist's commitment to perceptual partiality, let's now consider the case where the other person that you know have had the experience is your own future self. Alright, so future Noah is going to have some sort of experience. Anticipated experience. Shortly before noon, you are wearing a blindfold and facing a wall. You know that at noon the blindfold will be removed, and when that is, you will have an experience of a red wall. Okay. It seems that the dogmatist cannot allow mere knowledge that one will have an experience in the future to provide the same special boost of justification that actually having the experience provides. After all, according to perceptual partiality, knowing that someone else has the experience does not provide the same boost as actually having the experience oneself, and it seems that one's own future self should be no different from the dogmatist's point of view. For it is actually the experience itself rather than any knowledge one has about the experience which is supposed to be the distinctive source of justification. But so then, the problem with the dogmatist is that increasing your confidence that the wall is red at the time you actually have the experience, when you knew already that you were going to have the experience, seems to amount to a kind of diachronic irrationality. For suppose that before noon you withhold belief that the wall is red, even though you know that at noon the wall will look red to you. It seems irrational for you to suddenly be convinced that the wall is red once your blindfold is removed and you seem to see a red wall. You knew that this would happen. More generally, it seems irrational for you to substantially increase your confidence at noon that the wall is red merely because you are having the very experience that you knew in advance you would have. The problem here is that the subject in anticipated experience will, if she increases her confidence as a dogmatist suggests, violate what von Frosten calls reflection. I'm a little confused here. It's like, I can think of red, but you don't actually know the particular shade of red, the particular redness of the wall ahead of time. Even if I really, really, really thought I was sure about it, there's always going to be more information than you can sort of reflectively describe to yourself. So I'm not entirely convinced with this sort of description of what my future self will have, because it's like how fully can you actually describe your own experiences even to yourself? Reflection and remembering require they are a narrowing of the full experience. I can't remember everything that is happening right now, even 10 seconds from now. So I find this a little bit of a strange argument. But anyway, let's see what von Frosten calls reflection. Reflection is a bunch of symbols. That is, if at T1 you know that at T2 your confidence in A will be equal N, then at T1 your confidence should already be equal to N. Von Frosten showed that if you do not obey reflection, then you're open to being diachronically Dutch booked. You will accept bets different times that are guaranteed to lose you money over that time period. Yes, exactly what I was worried about. There's a very different sort of thing than confidence than perceptual experience. Like, if you know that the probability of a bet is going to be 75%, in the future, you should assume that it's 75% right now. That's very different. You can know 75% exactly. The redness of the wall, I don't think, is there's no 75% redness. Unless you're really, really, really good at the hex tables and you know the exact numbers perfectly. Even then, it would be very difficult. But I think there's a significant difference between experience and then a Dutch book, probabilistic or a betting style thing, where you can just put a number right on the anticipated target. Okay, so in this anticipated experience case, suppose you are a dogmatist and at T1 you are suspending judgment whether there is a red wall before you, but you already know at T1 that at T2 you'll have an experience of a red wall. Well, how certain is this knowledge? So, by the dogmatist's own light, you can know that at T1 that at T2 you will have a higher degree of confidence that there is a red wall before you. Since you know at T1 that at T2 you will enjoy a confidence-boosting kind of experience, which violates reflection, as according to reflection you should already at T1 adopt a higher degree of confidence. Okay. I think I'm a little worried about this conflation of confidence and the experience. Yeah, okay. Let's keep going. a response and an objection to it. And what follows, I want to defend the idea that the dogmatist can bite the bullet and simply accept that having experience can rationally increase one's confidence, even if one knew beforehand that one would have that very experience. For example, if someone whom you trust and take to be generally reliable tells you you will have a red wallish experience at noon, your confidence in that proposition, I'll have a red wallish experience at noon, may be around 0.9 or 0.95. See, what do these numbers mean? Like 95%? I don't know what that sort of a confidence and experience would be. I've never had an experience that I've had to rate confidently. That's a very strange thing. I mean, you can do this, but it's an odd sort of setup, and it worries me. Perhaps there's a relatively high level of credence counts as knowing you will have such an experience at noon, but then when you actually have a red wallish experience at noon, assuming you also know the time, your confidence in that position will be 1, or at least be extremely close to 1. And so in turn, your new credence in that proposition that there is actually a red wall before you could be higher when you actually have the red wallish experience, compared merely with beforehand that you are going to have this kind of experience. I mean, I also worry about gettier cases, like, is that really a barn or a barn facade? And it's like, am I experiencing a barn or a barn facade? So this is another sort of case where you might have like high credences, but that sort of is a little different because you're just talking about the experience of the wall, when you can have experience of the barn facade is basically the same. But another one where these sort of intuitions don't line up. Okay, this no longer seems to involve any kind of diachronic irrationality, for while S is pretty sure at T1 that she will have the experience at T2, and thus at T2 she will be confident that there is a red wall before her, at T1 S is still not as certain about the occurrence of the experience at T2 as she is at T2. Yeah, I mean, you don't quite know what the future is going to hold. So it could still be rational for us to become more confident that there is a red wall before her at T2 when she actually has the red wallish experience, despite already being pretty confident at T1 this was going to happen. Of course, future is uncertain. Barnett rejects this response on the following grounds. I admit that this defense gives a plausible explanation of why your confidence might justifiably increase slightly at noon. Even so, I think this defense cannot plausibly explain why one's degree of confidence for P could rationally increase more than slightly. If one knows that E, then one has at most a little room for doubt about E. See, it's very strange. Like, when was the last time anyone ever told you that you were going to experience a red wall at noon? It's a very unusual sort of thing, and so this sort of abstracting from your future experiences is questionable. Okay, keep going. If one knows that E, then I didn't have dinner yet today. I'm very sorry. I'm a bit of a curmudgeon, or more curmudgeon-y than normal. If one knows that E, then one has at most a little room for doubt about E. So there'll be little room for one's degree of certainty in E to increase, and thus little room for one's confidence in P to increase as a result of an increase in certainty of E. This is important because the anti-Cartesian proponent of perceptual partiality needs to say that one's confidence that the wall is red can increase substantially at noon. Alright, so now we're getting into like slightly and substantially issues. Alright. It matters for the dogmatist that the extra proprietary justification provided by actually having the experience is substantial rather than just a slight increase, because one of the main motivations for dogmatism, anti-Cartesianism, is supposed to be its ability to help resist the skeptic. If having an experience offered by only a slight increase in the strength of one's justification relative to what one would get from knowing about another person's experience, then the anti-Cartesian would have very limited anti-skeptical advantages over Cartesianism. For whatever the strength of our justification for perceptual beliefs might be under Cartesianism, the anti-Cartesian would be able to offer us only slightly more. That would be reassuring only if the skeptical worry was merely that we fall just slightly short of being justified in our perceptual beliefs. To have a noteworthy anti-skeptical advantage, therefore, the anti-Cartesian must claim that the proprietary justification conferred by one's experiences is substantial. In a footnote, he adds, although I take this point to be intuitively plausible, it can be reinforced by the familiar theorem of probability calculus. Alright, so given probability P given E, and probability V plus P given not E, probability E, you get all this stuff. So basically the upshot is that the probability of P can be less than the probability of P given E only to whatever extent that the probability of E is less than 1. So if you don't know about the experience, then it can be less, of course. Okay. It can be done. Okay, so log odds and the room for doubt. The problem here is that this notion of there being only little room for one's degree of certainty in E to increase, and so of having only little room for one's doubt, and so have only little room for one's confidence in P to increase, is an artifact of measuring expressing subjective probabilities or degrees of confidence on the interval 0 to 1. If we switch to expressing subjective probabilities in terms of odds or log odds, the appearance of there being only little room left for confidence to increase vanishes. In other words, Barnett's claim is problematically measure sensitive. Moreover, there are some good familiar reasons to think that log odd scale provides a clearer picture of how new evidence can boost already high levels of confidence, and so treat the familiar 0 to 1 interval as apt to be misleading in this respect. What? So you're just saying that we've been like switching out the scales is going to fix the problem? I mean, maybe, but it seems very odd. Okay. As well as expressing probability using numbers in the interval from 0 to 1 can, of course, be expressed as odds, say as a ratio, probability of H over probability of not H, that is, H to probability of 1 minus H. One respect in which using odds can be simpler or easier than using numbers 0 to 1 interval is that we can use the following simple formula. Posterior odds is equal to prior odds times likelihood ratio. Or more explicit formulation, alright, we'll take their word for it. The likelihood ratio, probability of E given H, the probability of E given not H, expresses how much more likely the occurrence of the evidence would be given that the hypothesis is true compared to how likely it would be if the hypothesis is false. Yeah. But notice, once we move to working odds, probabilities no longer expressed as numbers in the interval 0 to 1, but from 0 to positive infinity. Already then we have reason to be suspicious of the idea that when I am already very confident in a hypothesis, for example, the hypothesis that I will have a certain experience at noon, there's only a little room for my confidence to increase. When working with odds, there's always infinitely more room for one's confidence to increase. Yeah, but it's relative then. It doesn't really mean anything because, I mean, it's like, because if you can go up infinitely, that means there's infinitely more, and then like all the differences that are in like small numbers are also like are infinitely teeny compared to the infinitely big. That's like, so I'm not just changing your scale doesn't make any of the numbers significant. You have to have some sort of understanding of significance on the scale, because especially on infinity, because all the numbers, they can go up infinity. Like being twice as confident in something in the scale from 1 to 2 is nothing if like there's things at 4 billion whatever. So, but like you're still twice as confident moving from 1 to 2. All right. As well as working with odds, it also can sometimes be useful to work in log odds. If we take the logarithm of both sides of the equation, we get log posterior equals log prior plus log likelihood, or more explicitly, there's a long thing. Notice it doesn't matter what base we take for the logarithms. In the examples below, we will use base 2, which allows us to talk of bits of evidence in line with the standard units of information theory. Shannon's notions of entropy and mutual information are standardly measured in bits, which are computed with equations using logarithms base 2, though one could equally well use other bases. For example, the natural log is often used, whilst Jaynes recommends using log base 10, and so talks about decibels of evidence. That's a cutesy phrase, decibels of evidence. So something's really loud if it has a lot of evidence. One respect in which log odds scale can be simpler or easier to use is that instead of multiplying the priors with the odds ratio, as in the odds equation above, the log odds equation requires only addition. The log of the likelihood ratio, this formula, thus provides a very natural way of expressing the boost in confidence that the evidence provides, so as to take you from your priors to your posteriors. That is, it is a natural way of expressing the confirmatory strength of one's evidence. Using the logarithm of likelihood ratio as a measure of confirmation also has at least two other attractive features, which have been much discussed in the literature on confirmation. When we have lots of different independent pieces of evidence in favor of a hypothesis. Using the log of the likelihood ratio makes the confirmation of each bit of evidence simply additive. Okay, we'll take their word for it. Unlike nearly all other proposed measures of confirmation, the log of the likelihood ratio satisfies the following two very highly plausible constraints on any theory of confirmation. Symmetry, confirmation of H by E, disconfirmation of not H by E, that is, the negative confirmation of not H by E. And so if confirmation of H by E1 is greater than confirmation of H by E2, then confirmation of not H by E1 is less than confirmation of not H by E2. Logicality. All logical entailments of some H by some E have the same degree of confirmation, which is higher than any non-logically entailing degree of confirmation. And so, all logical refutations are equally strong disconfirmation, which is stronger than any non-logical disconfirmation. Yeah. And of course, once we move to expressing probabilities using log odds, then they can vary from negative infinity to positive infinity. So there's always more room for one's confidence to increase or to decrease. At this point, it is perhaps worthwhile to briefly give a graphic illustration of the difference between using the 0 to 1 interval and express probabilities using the log odds scale. No picture? Where's the picture? Oh, okay. Let's see. Following diagrams are taken from mathematical website Arbital. That's cool. Suppose that you initially think that some hypothesis H is just likely as its negation, not H. So in the 0 to 1 interval, you have a credence of H set to 0.5, or expressed as odd, credence of 1 to 1. Expressed in terms of log odds, a credence of 0 bits. Now suppose that you get 5 separate independent 2 to 1 updates in favor of H. That is 5 independent pieces of evidence for which the probability of E given H divided by the probability of not H equals 2. What is the effect of all these new pieces of evidence on your credences? And given the credences, you express the 0 to 1 interval, you get yourself from 0.5 to 0.97. And your odds go from 1 to 32 to 1. Graphically representing these changes, the probability goes from 0 to 1, so 50, and it slides up. These are nice pictures, at least. So yeah, it keeps going. The probabilities approach 1 but never get there. They just keep stepping across a fraction of the remaining distance, eventually getting all scrunched up near the right-hand end. If we instead convert the probabilities to log odds, the picture is much clearer, 0.5 or 50%. And the probability becomes 0 bits of credence, and every independent observation in favor H shifts by the unit along 1 unit along the line. So it basically, you're just equidistantly spacing stuff out. I'm sorry, I'm like, you can play, I feel like you can play with these, it's like just playing with the pictures here is supposed to give an intuitive feel for that the scale is going to fix a thing, but I just feel like that's more perceptual justification that is in some sense begging the question. By making it look a certain way, we're supposed to believe it. And it's like, well, I don't care how it looks. I want something like it seems a little circular, to tell you the truth, which is, of all things, a little funny to have circular arguments via diagram, which is actually kind of great, to tell you the truth. This is a lot of fun. What is important for the present purposes is that a change in confidence when represented on 0 to 1 can appear to be only slightly or insignificant if it occurs near either extreme, but the very same change in confidence when represented on the log odds scale can be seen to be significant. See, what is this seen? Yeah, see, appear to be only slightly, I mean, it occurs near either end or the extreme. I mean, yes, that's if we are visualizing this stuff as that, but like, again, we might, like, it might, the visualization may not actually matter to some of us. Like, I'm not particularly sold on how the visualization goes. Maybe I think like there's limits to hit in that scale before, and so as long as you're crossing those limits, then it is significant whether or not it went from 0.94 to 0.96. Okay, but the very same change in confidence when represented on the log odd scale can be seen significantly. The increase in confidence from 0.94 to 0.97 measured on 0 to 1 interval is roughly equivalent to an increase from 4 bits to 5 bits of confidence measured on the log odd scale. That is a confidence boost of 1 bit. Compare. An increase of confidence from 0.5 to 0.6666 is also equivalent to an increase in 1 bit. But here in the middle of the 0 to 1 scale interval is manifestly a significant increase in confidence. Well, that may be more important actually to get off the half mark to a 0.66. I mean, maybe that's a good thing. Another way of making the same point, on the 0 to 1 scale, increase from 0.5 to 0.50009 may appear to be the same significance as an increase from 0.999 to 0.99999. After all, an increase of 0.00009 in both it's an increase of 0.009 in both cases, right? No, like when you're on a scale like this scale matters. So it's like this seems very odd to me, because that's the whole point of switching the scale, so that these sorts of things make a difference. Okay, very grumpy today. But if we think in terms of odds, the former increase is equivalent to exchange from 1 to 1 to 1.0036, whereas the latter is increase in odds from a factor of 10, really. And in terms of log odds, the increase from 0.5 to 0.5009 is a boost of some very small amount of bits, whereas an increase from that factor of 10 when it's close to 1 is a boost of 3.332 bits. Using the 0 to 1 scale, then we can tend to compress and distort our intuitive sense of how much evidence strength is needed to move from one level of confidence to another. The strength of evidence needed to shift from 0.999 to 0.9999 is massively more than required to shift from 0.5 to 0.50009. Yeah, but maybe you want it that way, maybe you set it up that way. It all sort of like what you're trying to represent matters here. So it really worries me, because it seems like the way you set the scale up it depends exactly on what you're trying to measure. Now, if you're trying to measure things in a certain way, that's fine, but like you're also setting it up that way. So in some sense, I feel like this is a little circular here in how you're setting the scale up to already be the way you want it to be. But if you set up to be the way you want it to be, you're not explaining something with the scale. Let's consider now how this all applies to anticipated experience case. Suppose that merely learning beforehand, for example, on the basis of reliable testimony, that you will have an experience of a red wall at noon, which proposition I will abbreviate to the experience of red thingy, gives you a probability experience red of 0.95. Well, was that probability? Whatever. And suppose that actually having such an experience at noon increases this to, alright, so 0.99999. Putting in terms of log odds would seem like an increase of 4 bits. It would be the same amount of evidential boost as going from 0.5 to 0.95. But you see, this is the weird part. These numbers are meaningless. You are defining them as such. I mean, so it's like if you're defining your scale this way, you're defining your numbers this way, and so it's like you're making the numbers significant because you want them to be. Sorry. So, putting in terms of logs, the increase of 4 bits would be the same amount of evidential bit boost as going up from 0.5 to 0.95. I think this already shows that the first part of Barnett's objection, if one knows that E, then one has at most a little room for doubt about E, so there will be little room for one's degree of certainty in E to increase, can and should be resisted. Wait, let me read that again, I got distracted. I think this already shows the first part of Barnett's objection. If one knows that E, then one has at most little room to doubt about E, so there will be little room for one's degree of certainty in E to increase. Can and should be resisted. That's fair, because Barnett could be making the same sort of mistake on the side of how Barnett is doing their scale. When concerned in terms of odds or log odds, there is no lack of room. There is ample space for actually having the experience to make a very significant difference over merely learning that one will have the experience, for example, from reliable testimony. What about the second half of the objection Barnett makes, and thus little room for one's confidence in P to increase as a result of an increase in the certainty of E. Well, in order to deal with updating odd evidence that is less than perfectly certain, we can standardly use Jeffrey conditionalizing. I'll take their word on that. In this case, the less than certain evidence E, the proposition that I have an experience of a red wall at noon, and the hypothesis H is that there is a red wall before me now. Let's now plug in some numbers to illustrate how an increase in confidence about E can plausibly result in a significant increase in confidence about H, even if one already has high confidence in E. Okay, so suppose these things, and now let's suppose that in a situation where I learned beforehand via trusted testimony that I will have an experience of a red wall, P new is 0.95. So you can find out the new experience is at 0.95 certainty. So then on the basis of this testimony, you've got updated, you've increased from, what was it? Well, so you've gone from less to 0.9655. But now suppose by contrast actually having it, so yeah, so it's now from like what, 0.95? Oh, P old. Yeah, you've gone from like P old to 0.95 because you've updated, so that's a big update. But now suppose by contract I actually having experience of red wall takes my P new extremely close to 1, that is P new given the evidence of having the wall, so is about 1, so then you can just go with approximately 0.99. Given the above plausible looking values, the difference, plausible to who? This is not plausible to me. None of these things are plausible to me because I find it very strange to assign credences this way. Given the above plausible looking values, the difference between updating on mere foreknowledge via testimony of the experience versus updating on the basis of actually having experience is roughly the difference between 0.9655 and 0.99. Prima facie and experience thus as a value in the 0 to 1 interval. This might seem an only slight or insignificant difference. Again, intuitions, nothing nothing fixed there, or objective maybe. But if we convert these two probabilities into odds, we get roughly 28 to 1 versus 99 to 1, asking a gambler whether this is a significant difference. Again, this is intuitions. Your appeal to intuitions again. Ask a gambler what their intuitions are. 28 to 1 versus 99 to 1 might mean nothing if what's really good in this case is 3 billion to 1. And if we convert these odds to logs, we get log the 20 is 4.8 and log 2 99 is 6.6. So you're up, what was that? Yeah, almost 2. So this is a difference of 1.83 bits. We're switching back to the 0 to 1 interval, the same as the difference between 0.5 and 0.78. That is the difference between even money and odds of nearly 4 to 1. To repeat, the difference in confidence concerning E here results in a very significant difference in the confidence in H. The evidential boost that one receives from actually having the experience compared to with merely learning beforehand that one will have it is nearly 2 whole bits of credence. The moral here, even if one is already very confident of E, increasing one's confidence in E yet further can still result in a substantial, significant increase to one's confidence in H. Summary and conclusion. I have argued that the notion of having only little room left for one's confidence to increase only seems plausible because we are expressing probabilities in the interval 0 to 1. If we switch to using odds or log odds, this appearance of there being only limited room evaporates. Moreover, we have good independent reasons to think that log odds scale provides a better, clearer picture of the boost that a piece of evidence adds to one's prior probabilities so as to increase them to one's posterior probabilities. And when we use log odds to express and the increase in confidence that there is a red wall before one that results from actually having the red wallish experience, it becomes clear how this could indeed be a significant increase. Thus, the dogmatist bullet-biting response to the anticipated experience case remains a viable response. Significantly increasing one's confidence that there is a red wall as a result of actually having the red wallish experience need not involve any kind of diachronic irrationality. It can simply be the result of becoming more confident about one's evidence. Of course, nothing I've said here is meant to provide a positive argument for endorsing either dogmatism or perceptual partiality. I've only been arguing that dogmatism and perceptual partiality can withstand the specific threat of diachronic irrationality that is posed by the anticipated experience case. For all that has been said here, there may well be other problems with dogmatism and or perceptual partiality. For example, the much discussed objection due to Roger White, or see Hawthorne and Lensonen Arneo forthcoming. Okay, so this is one of the ones where it's like I feel like I have something to say here. I have very low credence, as it were, with how we assign numbers to the world. Like, I just find it very ad hoc and arbitrary. And so the fact that we somehow discount this sort of scaling here compared to this sort of scaling here, I find very well, people set up, it's like you lie with statistics, you set the world up as to describe the way you want it. And so the author here might be right about this, that their interlocutor, or the person they're criticizing, set things up this way because the person who set it up this way doesn't like their theory, and so they set it up to look bad. And then they're saying, no, this is the right picture, this is this one here. But I'm not getting the independent evidence that one has for picking one or the other, because I have no intuitions as to what the right scale is for any of this stuff. I mean, the idea that we can assign credences to our experiences is, there's no problem with that, but it seems very arbitrary to do it in a general sense that, like, you can know what these things are going to be, like 95%. It's like, well, I'm not sure what 95% amounts to under most cases. Okay, but there's a good point in understanding that the fight between Barnett and the dogmatist and the Cartesian should be, this is not where the fight's going to be, and so there is plenty of room left for the dogmatist. Like, this is a good defense of what they want to defend, but I mean, I'm just a little concerned with the whole argument, not this author, but like this sort of this has sort of become a problem. But okay, so this paper goes to solving that, which is good. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a safe day. Hope everyone has dinner and is not grumpy like me. So have a good night, and I'll see you. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye bye.